Ever wondered how a nation could fall into absolute terror? Welcome to Class Bites. Today, we're diving deep into the chilling rise of Nazism. How does a modern nation descend into a state of absolute terror? And what happens when its ideology of hatred cannot be contained within its own borders? The story of Nazism, formerly known as National Socialism, provides a chilling answer. It stands as a testament to how a far-right, totalitarian ideology born from the ashes of national humiliation and economic despair could seize absolute power and plunge the entire world into a catastrophic war. Associated inextricably with Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party, or NSDAP, Nazism was a particularly virulent form of fascism, a political philosophy characterized by its profound disdain for liberal democracy and the collaborative, often messy processes of the parliamentary system. Instead, it championed the absolute authority of a dictatorship, a system where all power is concentrated in the hands of a single, unquestionable leader. The ideological core of Nazism was a tapestry woven from the darkest threads of human prejudice. It was built upon a foundation of fervent antisemitism, a deep-seated and irrational hatred of Jewish people that would become the central, murderous obsession of the regime. This was complemented by a fierce anti-communism and a virulent anti-Slavism, which targeted the peoples of Eastern Europe as inferior. These hatreds were given a veneer of intellectual legitimacy through the embrace of scientific racism, a discredited set of beliefs that used pseudoscientific theories to justify racial discrimination and hierarchy. This ideology promoted a vision of white supremacy and, more specifically, Nordicism, which held that the Nordic peoples, characterized by blonde hair and blue eyes, were the purest and most superior members of an Aryan master race. The philosophy also drew heavily from social Darwinism, misapplying the biological concept of survival of the fittest to human societies to argue that conflict between races was a natural and necessary part of historical progress. This belief system culminated in the practice of eugenics, a horrifying social philosophy that advocated for improving the genetic quality of the human population through selective breeding and the forced sterilization or elimination of those deemed unfit. The government that emerged from this ideology, Nazi Germany, was the quintessential fascist totalitarian state. It is crucial to understand the distinction between a simple dictatorship and a totalitarian regime. While a dictator may hold absolute political power, a totalitarian state, as the Nazis established, seeks much more. It aims for the complete and utter control over every facet of human existence, political, social, and cultural, leaving no room for individual autonomy or dissent. Such regimes are almost invariably headed by a charismatic leader who commands a cult-like following, and in Germany, that leader was Adolf Hitler. His personal worldview was entirely synonymous with Nazi ideology. He preached a doctrine in which there was no equality between people, only a rigid racial hierarchy. At the very top of this pyramid were the blonde, blue-eyed Nordic German Aryans, the supposed masters of the world. At the very bottom, relegated to the lowest rung of humanity, were the Jews, who were cast as a parasitic and destructive force. This racial theory was intrinsically linked to the movement's extreme nationalism, which called for the unification of all German-speaking peoples into a single, powerful empire. To achieve and maintain its power, the Nazi Party relied heavily on the use of private paramilitary organizations, such as the Sturmabteilung, or SA, which were deployed to stifle any form of dissent and to terrorize political opposition into silence. The entire structure of the state was built around the centralization of decision-making by and absolute loyalty to a single leader, the Führer. The ultimate aims of this movement were threefold: to unite all Germans living in what they considered historically German territory, to gain vast new lands for expansion, a policy justified under the doctrine of Lebensraum, a German term meaning living space, and to systematically exclude and ultimately destroy those deemed to be either community aliens or members of inferior races whom they chillingly referred to as Untermenschen, or subhumans. The seeds of this destructive ideology were sown in the fertile ground of post-World War I Germany. The nation was engulfed in chaos, reeling from a profound political, social, and economic crisis. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed harsh terms, leading to a deep and pervasive sense of hurt national pride and uncertainty about the future. It was in this environment of desperation that Nazism arose. The global economic collapse that began in 1929 triggered a rapid and catastrophic rise in unemployment in Germany. Between 1929 and 1930 provided millions of jobless, hopeless, and dissatisfied voters. The Nazi Party masterfully exploited this widespread despair, promising a return to national greatness and scapegoating minorities for the country's problems. Their message resonated, and by 1932, the Nazis had become the biggest party in the German parliament, the Reichstag. This political victory paved the way for the ultimate seizure of power. Shortly afterwards, on the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. The consolidation of power was swift and ruthless. On the 14th of July 1933, Hitler's government passed a law declaring the Nazi Party to be the only legal party in Germany, effectively extinguishing all formal opposition. The final step came with the death of President Paul von Hindenburg in 1934. Hitler immediately merged the offices of President and Chancellor, taking the titles of Führer, Chancellor, and Commander-in-Chief of the Army. At that moment, Germany ceased to be a republic and became a fully realized totalitarian state with Hitler as its undisputed head. From the moment they took power in 1933, the Nazis began to implement their ambitious and aggressive policies, which were a direct reflection of their core ideologies. They immediately demanded the undoing of the Versailles provisions, viewing the treaty as an unjust humiliation. Their domestic and foreign policies were driven by the intertwined goals of anti-Semitism, the unification of all Germans, the acquisition of Lebensraum for agrarian settlers, the complete elimination of Bolshevism, and the establishment of the hegemony, or total dominance, of an Aryan or Nordic master race over the subhumans such as Jews and Slavs. The outbreak of the Second World War was not an accident or a miscalculation. It was the logical and inevitable outcome of Hitler's long-stated plans. These plans had been known to the German people since the publication of his book MeinKampf in 1926, and his government had been engaged in systematic preparations for war since 1933. From its very inception, Nazism never intended to establish its new order of authoritarianism and inequality for Germany alone. Its very dynamism was bound to expand and to spread. By its own nature, the ideology could not recognize any limits to its own volition. The only limits it could comprehend were those set by opposed superior forces. While Germany's aggressive foreign policy was not the sole cause of the Second World War, it was undeniably a large and central contributing factor. The invasion of Poland on the 1st of September, which officially initiated the Second World War, was the final, logical outcome of an ideology that craved conquest and was predicated on a vision of racial domination that could only be realized through violence on an unimaginable scale. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts or what you'd like to see next.